So I'm gonna introduce the guy who's gonna announce our keynote. Become a good friend of mine. Cade was gonna come up and tell some jokes and stories about Jim, but a little about Jim. Jim Herman is a graduate of BYU Business Program. He was also a member of the captain of the 1984 BYU Football National Championship team. After graduation, he was drafted by the Dallas Cowboys. And then in the few years following, he was a member of the Cincinnati Bengals. He's also a graduate of the J. Reuben Clark School of Law. Jim spent a number of years working for a Bain portfolio company that you guys, most of you probably know as Icon Health and Fitness. He's also co-founder of an enterprise software business called Found Inc. He is now the business development officer for HGGC with a focused effort on the Utah and Intermountain area. So I'd like to bring up Jim Herman.
Hello, everyone. I've never done this before. I've known Steve for 40 years. First guy I met at BYU walking across campus. I was a non-member from the great state of Wisconsin, showed up at BYU. I thought it was like Lewis and Clark, that it was named after this guy that had this trail going across the country, and they named some college after him out here, and I decided to go play college football there. And day one, I realized it was a different place. It wasn't in Wisconsin anymore. But first guy I met was Steve Young, and can't say enough good things about him. I won't bore you, because you guys probably all know him and all his accomplishments. But he is, I'm biased, my best friend and my boss and my coworker. And we're grateful to have the opportunity to talk to you guys. Utah has changed significantly. I'm part of our business development team with Huntsman Gay Global Capital, HGGC. Steve will explain to you that when he gets up here. But we're a middle market private equity firm, and we love to talk to people like you and find out about your businesses. And we're grateful to have the chance to spend a few minutes. I'm done. I'll turn it over to Steve. Thanks for having us. Nice to meet you all.
Way to go, bud. Just everyone wants to wake up and speak to a ballroom full of CFOs. You know, I do, because I recognize, I have this way of looking at the world through the football lens. Like, because football is unique in that there's a painted line, there's a field that's got boundaries, and there's, defined numbers of people, 22, on the field, and there's a scoreboard and a clock that forces you to run a play every 30 seconds, and then 80,000 witnesses. There's like real truth that happens on the field, like human behavior stuff. Like, you would love it. You're like, oh my gosh, because we don't metaphorically fumble the ball. Like, we actually fumble it. Right? It actually happens. And so when people, and especially around accountability, it's amazing to watch the human behavior when something bad happens on the field, how much as human beings we want to find the mitigation in it. We want to say, did you not, the guy tipped it, or you turned the wrong way, or you're like, there's 1,000 things that are happening amongst 22 people in a defined space. And so it's amazing to watch the human behavior and how we all try to wiggle out. Or wiggle in, depending on what's happening, right? And how much the truth on the field, you can't lie. Everybody knows, especially the players. And so for me, I look through the lens of that human behavior stuff as I define the rest of the world. And so when I think about, for example, when I think about wide receivers going down, scoring the touchdown, spiking the ball, dancing in the end zone, I think of sales, right? The sales guys, right? That's who they are, right? And they think that I'm the reason, right? I'm the one that got it done. I'm the king. Pay me more, And it's so isn't that true about wide receivers and salesmen? I mean, it's the same, right? And we know the CEO is a quarterback. We get that. I mean, that's probably a pretty. But then where does the CFO sit? And I'll let you think about that for a second, because you probably think, why do I play defense? And I say, no, because I would never do that to you. Like, no one that you really value plays defense, right? Only people that are kind of more leftover, that's who plays defense. In fact, in Pop Warner nationally now, they line up all 8th graders at Pop Warner football, and they ask them a simple question: what coast is the Atlantic Ocean on? And if you say East Coast, you play offense. And if you say West Coast, you play defense. And that way, the Pop Warner just feels like it gets it over early. It's like, Let's just get it all figured out. So if I think about CFOs, I think about linemen. Don't be mad, but I think about linemen, right? Protectors, guys that are, and you think, well, you think I'm this huge, overweight guy that can't move. And I want you to understand, when I say offensive linemen, the linemen that I know are some of the greatest athletes I've ever met. They're just really big. And so when you're really that big, in fact, there's a number of them in the Hall of Fame with me, and I was with one the other day, Anthony Munoz, and he was saying that when he was young, he could throw it, and we threw the ball at him. I go, oh, Anthony, you can throw the ball amazingly. He goes, I know, but I was too big. They wouldn't let me play quarterback because I was so big. They're like, you're too big. You got to play lineman. And so I played lineman my whole life, wanting to play quarterback. And so I have a feeling, that's what when I say CFO, that's what I'm kind of talking about, is an athletic, and some of my favorite linemen played quarterback with me. Not only were they doing their job, I have a great example. So we're in a big game and against the Cowboys back in the day. And Darren Woodson was a safety that played for the Cowboys. He was all pro. And he was really tough because he would sneak around and you never knew when he was coming, and he was really good at it. And there was this playoff game that we were in one time, and my right guard, Harris Barton, who was one of the smartest guys I know, one of the best athletes that I know, and one of the best linemen that I ever knew. He was the kind of guy that did his job and then wanted to do my job too. You know, he's like, that wasn't enough. And I remember one time taking the snap, as I dropped back, he's like, watch Woodson. And I'm like, oh, what? And I caught him out of the corner of my eye because Harris told me to watch for him as he was doing his job. He was having to block some big, huge guy. He was watching everywhere around to be careful about your flank, you know. And so when I say that about CFOs, I recognize that I know how you feel deep down, that you're the reason, right? But it's quiet. It's said amongst friends, right? It's not necessarily, certainly not the way sales guys do it. But we recognize that, you know, as a private equity professional for now over 20 years, and watching businesses and how they interact with internally and then externally with the world, excellent CFOs make the difference. And I know Gary Crittenden talked to this group last year. And Gary was one of my partners back in the day at the time, Huntsman Gay Global Capital, which is now HGGC. And I can't think of anyone better for you to listen to than Gary. I can't think of anyone worse for you to listen to than me when it comes to CFO. Because if there's anything that you do, my eyes glaze over. I did some accounting at BYU, and my eyes glazed over in accounting. And so I need you. There's a desperate need for great CFOs in my life. And so that way I guess we're connected in that way. There's a desperation to how I see what you're doing. So just keeping the theme around the offensive lineman and the athleticism, I remember, and I think this is my point of the few minutes we have together, is that I want this to be aspirational. I have nothing important to say to you about your job. And I probably didn't have much to say to Harris Barton about his job, other than, did you do it? Did you protect, did I get sacked or not? That was how I looked at it. But I had very little, I never told Harris Barton how to do his job. And that's very much the way that I see my relationship with you guys. I would have nothing important to say to you about your job, except the possibility of what your job can produce. My head coach at the time, early in my years at the San Francisco 49ers, was a guy named Bill Walsh. And Bill was extremely thoughtful. And his North Star was developing partnerships between coaches and players. At the time, and it's still very true today, most coaches look at players as not necessarily partners. I'm the coach, I have a big stick, I'm going to beat you, and you do what I tell you to do. And he was one of the earliest guys I know that thought about it as a partnership. And one of the best things that I can talk to you about that I think can empower you in your role today is to describe how Bill Walsh thought about organizations and people in those organizations, and then how to empower them. My first day that I was a 49er, they had a team meeting. It started the 1987 season. I know, it's a long time ago. And that season started with, in the crowd with me on the team was Joe Montana and Jerry Rice and Ronnie Lott and Tom Wright. If you follow football, you'll know some of these names, these Hall of Fame names. And Bill Walsh, who had already won 2 Super Bowls, and he stood up and talked to the team. And he talked about integration. And he said, look, what I want to do to this team this year, again, like I said, did last year, is integrate you. And when we thought about integration, we thought about race, because that's when we got black guys and white guys on the team, we got to work together, which is great, and I think it's important. But he thought about integration even beyond any kind of, he said, I want you to be integrated in all the things that keep you apart. He says, look around the room here. Seems like the quarterbacks are sitting together. The offensive linemen are sitting together. I notice in the lunchroom you do the same thing. If we're not careful on this team, we can play together for years, and you will not know much of anything about a lot of the people in this room. You can go through training camp and seasons on buses and planes and lunchrooms and hotels, and you might be able to say, hey, I know your name because it's on the back of their jersey, is about how much you know. And I said, the trouble with football is that we do not integrate. And I'm going to integrate this team. And I'm going to force you in the lunchroom to stand up and go and meet each other. I'm going to force you in the planes to sit with people that you're not comfortable with. I'm going to force you in the locker room. I'm going to cross-fertilize everywhere I can. Because my theory is that as we do that, there will be a moment, and we'll be at Lambeau Field in Green Bay and minus 10 degrees and 80,000 people screaming at you, you're down by 4 with a minute left. And then you got to get in the huddle and look at each other, and there has to be an element of love for each other. And I remember when I first heard him say that, I was like, I kind of snickered, like, love? Like, really love, you know? And he was very adamant about it. And he says, you can call it whatever you want to call it, but what I want you to know is know each other. And know each other beyond just hanging out and rubbing shoulders. I want you to have intimacy with each other in a way that you can't do unless I force it. And so that was my first speech from the new head coach. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, I like this place. This is a place I want to be. And he did do that. And he forced that integration. And I met a lot of guys on the team I would have never met. And there was a sense of a spirit to our team. And over the years, we won for 18, 19 years, we were in the playoffs, 19 years in a row. People don't remember the 1981 to 1999 or 2000. We were in the playoffs every year. And we won 5 Super Bowls and probably could have won 11. And people always say, why? How did you guys do that? Well, and it must have been the quarterback. It must have been the offense. It must have been the West Coast offense. It must have been, and really deep down, this is why. Every year, we had a team that had each other's backs. I remember vividly one of my first practices with this team. Now, I'd joined, Joe Montana was on the team, he was the king, and I was the interloper. And I talk about these high-minded things, but you know, human beings are human beings. I wasn't treated very well when I first joined the team. And I remember I was in practice one day, and I went back and threw the ball and did something terrible, threw an interception or something in practice, and I heard a group of guys over there say, what a loser, you know, what a waste of money. And Ronnie Lott, the kind of the leader of the team, essentially stopped practice, walked over in front of those guys, and he told a quick story about how his dad told him when he was young that no matter what happened, he would always have my back. Ronnie Lott, my dad, he would always have my back. And I said, I want to turn to Steve right now. He's new to this team. But I want you, Steve, to know that no matter what happens, no matter where we go, I will have your back. And it almost makes me tear up today to think about the impact that he had in making that statement. Because what happened is it broke the natural evolution of human being and left alone the human interaction. It broke it in a way that fundamentally now those same guys we were connected. I didn't hear those comments anymore. We were now integrated. And so integration is not just a speech. You know, it has to actually be worked at. And it's not easy. How do you live your own life? We tend to comfort. We do. We're also, and I seek to find, especially at my age, I'm trying to find ways to find more peace, more time, downtime, more, you know, just more what I think is quality time. But I think that more than anything, if you're going to do these jobs and we're going to represent these businesses and actually do things that corporations have the potential to do, You know, private equity has a lousy name for this reason. Corporations have a lousy name for this reason, because we're all scientists and we're all profit motive at our North Star, our profit motive, and then it slides down, and below that top profit motive is like way down the list is something else. And what I want to do today is try to make a case for elevating this sense of abundance, I'll call it. And if it can actually start to become a coexist with the profit motive, and what we can do with it, and what is the full measure of what a spirit of abundance can create in an organization of people. It was Steve Covey that I ran into on a plane one day in the worst time of my career. I was in the dumps, I was depressed, I tried to replace Joe Montana, I was failing at it, it was a disaster. And I ran home to Salt Lake City to walk around the streets of University of Utah, where my brother was going to med school, and just try to find some peace. And I did that, and on my plane home, I got on a Delta flight, sat next to Steve Covey, the famous guy from 7 Habits. Hadn't really met him or talked to him before, and he asked me how I was doing. And I said, you know, and then I laid it on him, and I told him all the terrible things that were going on. And I said, one of the biggest problems I have is that I should have played tennis or golf, because then it would be just me. I don't have to worry about 10 other guys and their undercommitment, or their lack of preparation, or their lack of accountability, or I know I could take care of the job, but I have to count on all these guys, and I'm frustrated. And he said, Steve, you're missing the point, because it's scientifically proven that 7 is the most people that can work together without degradation, like without devolving. And so if 7's the number, then football is 11, you're in trouble, because they prove scientifically that you add an 8th person, it geometrically goes down. 9th, geometrically again. It's not like step functions, like it just goes into the ground. Interesting about human behavior. So you get to 11, you got total chaos. And I was like, thanks for making my point. I appreciate that. She says, but you're missing the point. The point is that when, and he said, I spent my whole life doing this, because I'm looking for organizations of more than 7, by definition, too many, scientifically, who have found ways to create an environment where individuals on the platform, or the company, or the family, or anything else, that they have a chance to iterate to see how good they can get. And the platform provides this iteration, this ability for everyone to go seek their highest and best use. Then I find those qualities of what does that, and I write books about them. And I said, so I think when you're thinking about football, you're thinking it as a negative. But in many ways, because there's so many, when you do something well as a group beyond scientific, it's magical. It's beautiful. And some of the most beautiful things in the world that have ever happened have happened with too many people, by definition. By definition, that's the magic. And I never thought about it that way. And I saw football completely different, in that I was trying to leave behind the possibility of the magic for just my own credit. Like if I just played tennis, I'm good. But there's something too, and I suspect that most of you are representative of businesses that are more than 7. And in that, the CFO can be the glue, as our offensive linemen are on the field, the glue and the reason, deep down, the reason why things happen. And so if you guys, you men and women, can figure out ways to create a spirit of abundance, and I'm going to define abundance very clearly in my mind by an example of Bill Walsh when I told you he stood up. The second thing he talked about after integration, I noticed as he started to talk, there was someone in the corner that had a big, 1987, had a big video camera on his shoulder with a cord, and he was recording him. And then he walked, and Bill would finish the meeting and went out to the practice field, and he walked and followed him out there. And then he walked back in, followed him back in. And I remember thinking the first day that I saw this, I thought it was kind of odd, and chuckled to myself that I know he's famous, but are they making a museum? Or what are they doing that he's doing with all this footage of him walking around and talking? What he was doing, and I'm embarrassed to say this, what he was doing was creating a physical repository of everything that he knew. Every bit of the West Coast offense that he'd ever thought about, through the installation books, through the pages of the playbooks, through his own video of him installing it, talking about it, to the audio-based recordings of him describing what's important about all the things he knew. He just had an audio, video, and paper-based repository of everything that he knew and why he was great. And what did he want to do with it is the key. He made it, he created it, and then what did he do with this proprietary knowledge that he knew he was 2 or 3 generations ahead of everybody else in the NFL? And it's been proven out, by the way. Every coach that's successful today, but for Bill Belichick, has come from this toolkit. This toolkit has a never-ending headwaters of successful coaching. And so when he was thinking about it, what he wanted to do was empower his minority coaches who were not getting head coaching jobs, so that as they got head coaching jobs, they could be successful. He knew with this toolkit, you will be successful. And so he handed it to his assistant coaches as they got head coaching jobs. But with our success, of course, they're getting all these head coaching jobs. And the last thing he would say, this is apocryphal. I don't know. I was not in the room when he said this, but a couple have said this to me, that he said on the way out the door as he handed it to them and wished them luck, I'll see you in the championship game. Because he knew with something that was 2 generations ahead of everybody else, that you, with how your capabilities, you take this out with this team, you're going to come back again and we're going to see you in the championship game. And we did. 1995, I don't know, it all runs together. Green Bay Packers championship game. Mike Holmgren, who was our assistant coach for the 49ers, took the toolkit to Green Bay. And if you track Andy Reid, you track Doug Peterson, you track Andy Reid's coaching tree, you'll know what I'm saying. It has been, the coaches are everywhere that are now throughout the league. And Bill Wallace passed away in 2006, unfortunately, because he would be really heartwarming for him to see what it looks like today. And so much of what the offense in the NFL is doing today is really rooted out of his West Coast offense. And he would love that. And I know that one thing he would say if he was watching today, he would say, dang, why didn't I think of that? Because when you're great, greatness beyond you that you empower actually builds off of what your greatness is. It's greatness exponentially, right? It goes on. It's greatness on top of. And so I know he'd see today's offenses and go, dang, I don't know why I didn't think of that. And I've thought about it myself too, because I can't believe some of the fun things that people are doing today. So in this spirit of abundance, I'm not saying that you take your proprietary knowledge that you have with your business and you package it up and start handing it out. Because in the end, this doesn't necessarily work exactly one-to-one. But the spirit of legacy, the spirit of integration, the spirit of actually saying to yourself, profit motive leads, I get it. But right up here behind it or next to it or even maybe on top of it, can we create an environment where there's a spirit of abundance, where we see each individual and give them an opportunity to iterate per Steve Covey and find their highest and best use in their lives? And do we give that place where we integrate with each other and find the highest and best use of us as a group? Because any air between us in many ways is friction when it really counts, when we're trying to execute. And I can tell you one of the reasons why we were great for so long was because of this sense of abundance and integration that we bottled up. And we found in the next generation to inherit it and believe in it and pay it forward. Interestingly, a guy named Tim McDonald joined our team as all-pro safety. He was playing for the Cardinals. He was out of USC and played for the Cardinals for years. And towards the end of his career, he joined our team and became our team captain in the late 90s. And I remember sitting down with him and really with a lot of emotion, having him describe what it felt like to be on this team as opposed to what he had been experiencing. And describing exactly what I just told you about in his own words. And how emotionally he was about it because it gave him such great value. A sense of, like, I can retire now because I've been to the mountain and I've seen it and I've experienced it and it's beautiful. And I want to pay it forward because I now see its beauty. If every business in Utah, and I'm going to speak in Silicon Slopes next, I can't remember what it is, it's a couple weeks, but you can see what I'm going to be talking about, because if every business in Utah could find its full measure of the bounty and the abundance in it, you could change my theory is you could change the world. If you could create an environment where, and this is not easy, but it has to be, you have to talk about it a lot. You have to create the opportunities. And there's a lot of, but it has to be from an intent. If it's not intentional, it won't happen. And we'll just talk about it. It'll be theoretical and be something, hey, Steve Young talked. He didn't really help me as a CFO at all, which I fully admit, I'll stipulate too. I knew I was going to help you there. But I can tell you that I would love to empower you to take Bill Walsh's inspiration and ingest it into your business and create the environments and start to create the environments that can start to allow for this, what I call the spirit of abundance. I don't think it makes you, people might make fun of it that it's soft or that it's not necessarily, what's the bottom line? What's the ROI in this effort? I want to know what the ROI is. It's going to be more difficult by definition because it's principle-based. It's not prescriptive. It's a principle that you know deep down works. And so the ROI is going to have to be calculated in a different way. And it's not going to be able to be calculated very quickly. And it's over a period of time. But I hope that just a few minutes together, my dream, and I've been evangelizing this, took me a long time to figure out Bill Walsh. I didn't realize in 1987 that he was this genius. It took me a long time. But as I realized it and looked back on his life and actually shared the last days of his life, telling him how much I appreciated and how much he was really grateful that somebody thought about it that way, because I don't know that he even knew what he was doing. He knew that it was the right thing to do. He knew that it was the right way to talk about integration and about how human beings behave, but he hadn't even seen its full measure. So that just shows you that over time, we need to iterate together and figure out new ways to do it. I know I might run late, 5 minutes. I did want to give a couple minutes for questions if anyone had anything for me based on what I've said or anything else that's been bugging you around. I have no insight into the Utah Jazz. I have no insight into, I'll send you to other people for that. But any questions? Yes?
What's your prediction on October 8th for the BYU Notre Dame game?
Which team's showing up? The Baylor team or the Oregon team? Right? So it's always hard. I really believe in Kalani. I believe Kalani has bottled up a lot of this that I just described. I had a brief conversation with him, not that it helped at all, but he's doing these kinds of things. He's creating this kind of environment. And we're punching above our weight, and we have been punching above our weight for a long time. We've had our hand tied behind our backs in recruiting. We've done some self-inflicted wounds in recruiting. We have created some environments that are tough. And yet, a lot of things are not out of our control. And so I think that for where we are as a school, we've really punched above our weight. And now, obviously, with the Big 12, get a chance to do something really special. While we're at the U, I think Kyle Whittingham's a very dear friend. And I really believe in his vision of running the Pac-12, or now the Pac-10, into the future. And he's trying to build a program that does that. So I guess the good news is that both schools in Utah I think are thriving for the long term. But as individual games, so I think I'm going to flip the coin for that game. Tim Brown's a good buddy of mine. He's a Heisman Trophy winner from Notre Dame, and he and I are best friends. And it was his idea that we flip the coin for that game. And I'm not sure it's actually happening, but there's a good chance I'll be down there, and I'll give a good pregame speech or something.
I'm a Notre Dame alum, so.
Oh yeah, so you. Sorry, I took the wrong cue. I'll let you call Tim on that one. You guys are in trouble. Any other questions anyone has? Yes?
So you've been in private equity for a while now. What do you gravitate within private equity doing? Are you like the fundraising guy? What do you spend your time on?
Well, everyone figures I'm the guy out in front shaking hands, right? Because what good could a... It's the same thing with any profession. You know, what's a football player doing in private equity? He's probably glad-handing and making sure that everybody, you know... Because I know you guys. It's like we were when we were in the locker room and some guy rolled in and tried to be one of us in the locker room. We're like, bro, take it somewhere else, right? So I would tell you that I started with my North Star as I finished my career. Advice from Roger Staubach, my hero, was run and be humble. Like, don't hang around talking about the old days. Plenty of people will talk about the old days. You don't need to worry about it. You, with humility, go try to become, because he said, the day you retire from football, the day before you retired, you're one of the best in the world at something. The day after you retire, you're not that anymore. What are you even good at? What would you list the things that you're actually good at, let alone great at? And the list was very short. And so just admitting that and recognizing that, but the desire to be great again. And so with that kind of sense of humility and trying to find my way forward, am I the greatest modeler of businesses? Because I got my law degree, I didn't get my MBA degree. I'm probably not the best modeler. Our firm does not turn to me for the modeling expertise. But when it comes down to negotiations and this spirit that I'm describing of what we're trying to do is we partner, HGGC partners, we have 44 platforms over 15 years. And every one of them referenceable into the future, because that's the kind of partnerships we're building. Are they all perfect? Did they go smooth and silky every time? Did we have some disasters? 100%. But in the relationship, is it referenceable? And because it's referenceable, you can see I have a lot of passion about it. And so you could go talk to the 44 leaders of those businesses, and you'd have a lot of different stories, but in the end, did they do what they said? Did they treat you like a true partner? And the answer to that is always yes. And so for me, I hope you didn't ask anyone else in my firm, and they asked me what I do, and they said he's kind of a glad hand guy. That would hurt my feelings. But I recognize my strengths and weaknesses. So I don't know where you want to go with that, because that's why I honor the CFOs in this room for your expertise. I am not you, and I honor that expertise, I tell you for sure. Any last questions? I know we got to go. Yes? So it's interesting. It's a hierarchy. The first is my wife, and I'm not joking about that, because we got married 22 years ago, and I have made my priority making sure that we're thriving, and I do that every day, because I know if I'm going to thrive everywhere else and all the things you just described, I'm going to go into the ground if that's not thriving. Like, I just know me. I know how I'm built, and I need that to go well. And so and anyone that's been around me for a long time knows I'll go great lengths to make sure that works out. And that is a lot of humility. That's a lot of accountability. You know how many times I screwed up, and I screwed up. I learned this in throwing interceptions. If you want a team to follow you and you throw an interception, don't tell them all the mitigation, all the things that went wrong. They don't want that. They want accountability. They want you to say, I screwed it up. The ball was in my hands, it's in their hands, I screwed this up. And with that accountability infused in the system. And I think there's a lot of accountability. And there's also a sense that it's not a contract with my wife. I told her earlier, I was like, it's not a deal. We're not making a deal. I'm in 100%. And when I'm not 100%, just remind me. Like I'm sure there's 1,000 times when I haven't been, but I'm in. And so I don't want anyone calculating what the effort is. I'm not calculating your effort. I'm not keeping track. I'm just in. And so then from there, I think then I got this business that I started in 2007 that I very, very much care about in HGGC. And so that's the next kind of, after the kids, of course. And then, I prioritize that, and we've ingested all my philanthropic efforts through the company. Monday Night Football next Monday in New York. The Giants play the Cowboys. I'll be on pregame on the field. While on the field with me will be potential companies that we're partnering with. One of them very important here in Utah, and we'll have a suite full of bankers and intermediaries and people we want to get to know better in New York, and that's how that works. And so they've ingested me, I guess that's what I say. So all of what I do, Forever Young Foundation, we have 3 big golf tournaments. Well, that's our CFO conference, that's our CEO conference for all our portfolio companies. They come into Park City or to Scottsdale, and we do this. And so all of that now, and Forever Young is doing great, the foundation, because it all kind of works together. So I appreciate my partners willing to take in me and find a more profitable way forward. And then how do I decide? Most of it's relationships. Friends ask me to do something, here I am. I hope I came through for them. I didn't waste your time. Because it's, and anytime I can be in Salt Lake is a positive for me. I was born here. My dad was at the University of Utah Law School, going to school at the U when I was born. I was born at LDS Hospital, and I was raised the first 3 years of my life on campus at the U in student housing. So I don't want to have any baloney about BYU and Utah. I'm in. I'm in. I find the spirit of abundance in the rigor of our relationship. I'm good with the rigor. I'm good with the back and forth. I'm good with creative tension. I'm good with that. But it never goes toxic. Never. I'm in for the state, right? I'm in for whatever's happening from Tremonton to St. George. So I'm hopeful that I can be helpful in whatever way I can. And appreciate the time. And thanks.